I should have left the radio where I found it, half buried under a blanket of dust, tucked in the darkest corner of a dead man's attic. The house on Hollow Pike had been abandoned for nearly a decade, left to rot after its owner, Curtis Mallon, vanished without a word. No funeral, no will, just a locked door and a lingering smell of mildew soaked into the walls. The town labeled it a clean-out job, and that's why I was there. Me, Grellish Arden, freelance junk fixer, part-time ghost hunter if you ask the kids at the hardware store. I wasn't expecting anything special, just a paycheck and maybe a few salvageable antiques to flip online. But the moment I stepped into that place, I knew something was off. It was the silence, not the usual creaky floorboards or distant wind pushing at the windows. This was a stillness that swallowed sound, thick like wet wool. My boots echoed louder than they should have on the warped wooden floor. The smell hit me next. Mold, rust, and something faintly sour, like old paper left in rainwater. The attic was the last room I checked. The stairs groaned in protest under my weight, but I climbed anyway, flashlight in hand. Cobwebs laced the ceiling beams, thick as curtains. The air was hot and dry, making it hard to breathe. There were boxes stacked in lopsided towers, yellowed newspapers, old vinyl records warped from heat. I started sorting through them half-heartedly, ready to call it a day, when I saw it. A green canvas tarp in the corner, barely covering something metal. I pulled it back, and there it was, an old military-style radio, the kind with thick knobs and analog dials, built into a dented steel case. It had a red sticker faded to pink that read property of U.S. Army. Do not remove. Most people would have ignored it, or maybe gotten spooked. But I'm not most people. I brought it home. The thing weighed a ton, and I had to rig a cart just to roll into my workshop behind the house. It smelled like copper and old oil. I spent the better part of the evening cleaning the grime off its faceplate, gently brushing dust from the vents, and checking for corrosion. The internal tubes were mostly intact, and by some miracle, the main power coil hadn't fried. That should have been my warning. I ran a basic test hookup. No signal generator, just power and grounding. The radio flickered to life like it had only been sleeping. The dial backlit in a dull, orange glow. The frequency gauge twitched. Static. Just good old-fashioned white noise, hissing like wind through dry grass. I leaned in, adjusting the dial slowly. Most of the channels were dead. A few gave off faint Morse code beeps, probably some amateur operators out in Canada. I started to turn it off, but then I heard it. A whisper. Faint. Crackling. At first I thought it was a trick of the static, just noise arranging itself into something almost human. But then it came again. Louder this time. Clearer. Help me. I froze. My hand still on the dial. Heart skipping like a faulty wire. Please, it's dark. Don't let him find me. The voice was thin, weak, like someone speaking from the bottom of a well. Then silence. Nothing but the static, back like a blanket thrown over everything. I backed away from the radio. I don't scare easily. I've wire high-voltage rigs that sparked like lightning. I've been inside houses that smelled like death and creaked like they were alive. But this felt wrong. Because I recognized the voice. It sounded like my brother. But my brother's been dead for 20 years. I didn't sleep that night. The radio stayed cold and quiet on the workbench. I kept staring at it, waiting for it to speak again, half hoping it would, half praying it wouldn't. And when the clock on the wall ticked past 3:13 a.m., I swear I heard something move inside the static, just for a second. A breath, a whisper, a warning. I should have unplugged it right then, but I didn't. And that's where it all began. I didn't sleep well that night. Even after I turned off the radio, even after I double-checked the locks and pulled the curtains tight, the words still echoed in my head. Help me. Please, can't see, it's dark. They came back like a skipping record. No matter how hard I tried to forget, my brain kept replaying the voice. Not loud, but just enough to keep me restless. By morning, I had convinced myself it was some weird interference. Maybe an old emergency broadcast or a trucker messing around on a shortwave channel. That had to be it. Nothing more. But then why did it say my name? I spent most of the day trying to fix other people's broken things. Radios, microwaves, a turntable that refused to spin. My hands were steady, but my thoughts wandered back to that sound. That voice. It had trembled like whoever spoke was freezing or terrified. By sunset, I couldn't hold back anymore. I sat back down on my workbench, dusted off the old radio, and switched it on. A low hum filled the room. I adjusted the dials, slowly turning the frequency wheel, listening to bursts of white noise, bursts of silence, and faint snippets of music from across the globe. Nothing. But then I looked at the clock. 3:12 a.m. I didn't even realize how long I'd been sitting there. And then it happened again. At exactly 3:13, the static thickened. It deepened, like it had weight behind it. Then, almost gently, a voice slipped through, softer than the night before. Still shaky, still desperate. "Grellish, please, you're close, it hurts." I stopped breathing. That wasn't a recording. That was someone speaking to me, saying my name. Not just once now, but twice. It felt like cold water dripping down my spine. I grabbed a notepad and wrote down everything I heard. Every word. Every pause. But the voice didn't stay. It flickered in and out, like it was drifting on a breeze I couldn't feel. I adjusted the dial again, slowly, carefully, but the signal was gone. Just static now. Plain, dull static. I sat there for another hour, waiting. Nothing. I tried to make sense of it. Who knew my name? Was it local? A prank? Some trick signal bouncing off the atmosphere? I told myself I was imagining things. That I was tired. That my brain was playing games because I wanted something interesting to happen. But I knew better. That voice was real, and it needed help. I should have turned it off. I should have packed it up, thrown a sheet over it, maybe even taken it out back and smashed it to pieces. Instead, I left it plugged in, and I waited for tomorrow. I didn't sleep that night. The voice had returned, just as I thought it might. It came through the static like it knew I was waiting. Same time, 3:13 a.m. Same broken words. But this time, it sounded closer, more real, like someone was standing just behind the wall, whispering into my ear through a crack in reality. I sat there in the glow of the radio's dull green light, the knobs cold under my fingers, the air thick and still. Every time I thought the signal was fading, it would lurch back in with a soft crackle and another plea. "Please. I can't see, he's coming." I turned it off after that. Or I thought I did. The voice still echoed in my head, even when the room went quiet. That's when I realized I needed to know more. Not just about the voice, but the machine itself. Where it came from. Why it still worked after all these years. Why it seemed like it was never really off. That morning, I went back to the farmhouse on Hollow Pike. The house had been locked since I first cleared out the place, but the real estate agent owed me a favor. It only took one call to get the keys again. She told me to be quick. I promised I would. I didn't mean it. The place smelled worse than before. Mold, dust, the heavy scent of rot that clung to the old wallpaper like a second skin. I climbed the attic steps again, flashlight trembling in my grip, and ducked under the low beams into the cramped space where I first found a radio. Most of the junk had been cleared out, but I remembered where I'd found it, sitting atop a pile of yellowed newspapers and rusted tins, like someone had left it there for me. I rummaged through the boxes near the back wall, hoping for anything else that might explain its presence. That's when I found the journal. It was buried beneath a moldy blanket and a stack of old ham radio catalogs. Leather-bound, cracked along the spine. No name on the cover. I opened it gently, the pages stiff with age. The handwriting started neat, but quickly turned frantic. Some entries were just scribbles. Others were pages of numbers and call signs I didn't recognize. But buried in the middle was a passage I'll never forget. First transmission, August 17th. Female voice. Soft, frightened. Said she was cold. Second, male voice. Louder. Screaming about frequencies beneath the floor. They don't stop, even when the radio's off. I took out the batteries. Still heard them. Tried burning it. Fire went out. It won't let me leave. It won't let me forget. My skin crawled as I read on. Further down the page, there was a phrase scrawled over and over again, the ink darker, pressed into the paper like he'd carved it with a pen. The signal is hungry. I kept flipping, faster now, desperate for more. The final entry was dated 6 months ago. Just 2 lines. He knows I hear him. He's coming through. The rest of the journal was blank. I stood there in the attic, heart pounding, the silence pressing in like a vice. I didn't know who he was. I didn't want to. But some part of me, some stubborn, broken piece of curiosity, wouldn't let it go. I had to keep listening. That night, I brought the radio back out. I cleaned it again, took it apart piece by piece. I wanted to understand how it worked, how it was still pulling signals out of the air like ghosts out of graves. The tubes were old, but intact. The wires were worn, but functional. I couldn't find a logical reason for the voices. Every technical part made sense. Every sound it played did. At 3:13 a.m., I powered it on. This time, I didn't hear a voice. I heard breathing. Shallow, ragged, like someone was sitting just beyond the speaker, gasping for air. Then came a single word, low and trembling. Grellish. I froze. No one knew I'd been listening. No one but me. Grellish. The voice said again, softer this time. Don't let him hear you. He watches through the wires. The static roared, loud and sudden, like 1,000 screams behind a veil of electricity. I yanked the power cord out of the wall and stumbled back, falling onto the floorboards. But the static didn't stop. It kept going. The radio was unplugged, but the sound, it kept going. And in the center of the static, under all that noise, I could still hear it. Breathing. And my name. Whispered again and again. I didn't sleep. I just sat there, watching the dark, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life by turning that thing on. And knowing deep down, it wasn't done with me. Not yet. I wasn't sure what I expected to find in Blackwood Forest. Maybe some old hunting shack or a rusted antenna sticking out of the ground like a broken bone. But when I followed the coordinates from the transmission, past the edge of the known trails, through brambles that tore my sleeves, I found something much stranger. A building, hidden and forgotten. It sat behind a veil of trees, so thick it was like walking through curtains. The kind of place you'd never stumble upon unless something wanted you to. The structure was low, round, and half sunken into the earth, covered in ivy and dead leaves. Moss climbed its walls like old scars, and rust painted streaks down its sides. Above the steel door, just barely visible beneath decades of grime, was a faded sign. Ashevale Radio Observatory. I stared at it for a long time, heart drumming. I hadn't told anyone I was coming here. No cell signal. No map. Just static and instinct. I pushed open the door. It groaned like it hadn't been opened in years. The inside smelled like wet stone and dust. Old electronics hummed with a life they shouldn't still have. There were towers of analog gear, reel-to-reel machines, cracked monitors, consoles lined with knobs and dead buttons. Dust floated in the dim light that filtered through a single grimy window. And then a voice. Didn't expect company. I spun. A man stood in the shadows near the back wall, holding a wrench. He was tall and thin, his gray beard tucked into a worn flannel shirt. Pale blue eyes behind glasses. Didn't mean to startle you, he said. Not many folks come looking for this place. Most don't know it's here. I hesitated. I didn't come here by accident. He seemed amused by that. Nobody does. Not really. He stepped forward, extending a hand. Robe and veil. I look after this place. What's left of it? I shook his hand. It was cold and dry, like old paper. Grellish Arden. I repair radios. Found some strange frequencies. They led me here. He raised an eyebrow, but didn't look surprised. The signal, he said. It's still out there, then. I nodded slowly. You know what it is. He looked past me, toward the bank of old machines. I know what they try to make it be. That's not the same thing. I didn't answer, just watched him as he walked toward a panel and flipped a switch. A soft whine filled the room, like something long asleep had stirred. They built this place in the 50s, Robin said, his voice almost lost in the hum. Cold War paranoia. Thought they could use radio waves to pick up enemy communications. Maybe even things from farther out. He glanced at me, but they found something else. What was it? He looked me in the eye. Something that talks back. My skin crawled. The radio at home. The voice whispering my name. The feeling I was being watched through sound. I've been listening ever since, Robin said. Monitoring. Making sure it doesn't spread. He didn't sound convinced it was working. Have you heard it? I asked. Oh yes. He gave a small smile. Heard too much, if you ask me. I felt a chill run down my arms. What do you think it is? A person? A recording? I think it's a mirror, he said. It reflects what you bring to it. But the more you listen, the less of you there is to reflect. That made my stomach tighten. I looked around. The machines blinked slowly, like eyes opening and closing. One of the reel-to-reels was turning now, even though no one had touched it. Robin saw me looking. They still work. Not sure how. I stopped asking. I cleared my throat. Why stay here, then? Why keep this place running? He turned back toward me. His expression had changed, Gentler now. Sad, maybe. Because someone has to make sure the door stays closed, he said. And someone has to warn the ones who come knocking. His eyes narrowed. You've been listening, haven't you? I nodded. Then it's already too late to pretend you haven't. Silence stretched between us, filled only by the buzz of ancient machines, and something deeper, something below the noise, like a breath in the static. Robin stepped back into the shadows, as if our conversation was over. I didn't stay much longer. When I left the observatory and stepped back into the trees, the forest felt different, quieter, like the woods were holding their breath. And in the back of my mind, something new had taken root. A voice I hadn't noticed before. Whispering. Waiting. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it. Not the voice. No, that would have been too easy. What I heard was the silence before it. That moment of deep, dead air where it feels like the world is holding its breath. I'd lie in bed, waiting, listening to the walls like they might whisper secrets if I stayed still enough. By morning, I felt like a ghost wearing my own skin. I made coffee, but didn't drink it. I just needed something warm in my hands. Something real. On the kitchen table sat the notebook I'd started. Pages full of strange numbers, scribbled times, half-heard phrases. I flipped through them, but nothing made sense anymore, until I remembered the box in the attic. It was buried deep behind the insulation and the dead spiders, covered in dust and dried leaves. I'd shoved it up there when I first moved in, thinking it was just old family junk. Inside were things that used to belong to my brother, Evan. He disappeared when I was 10, just vanished, like fog at sunrise. No body, no leads, just a bike at the edge of the woods and a broken walkie-talkie buzzing softly. For a while, they thought he ran away. Later, they said probably worse. But I never stopped looking for a reason. I opened the box. His notebooks were still there, cheap school pads with torn covers. Some are filled with drawings, radios, satellites, weird spirals. Others had codes. At the time, I thought they were just games he made up, but now, I wasn't so sure. I grabbed the thickest one, labeled in his handwriting, Codex Ashvale. That name made my skin crawl. I took it downstairs, sat at the table, and opened it slowly. Inside were pages of symbols, numbers, and phrases that looked like gibberish. Except, some of the phrases matched the ones I'd written in my own log from the radio. Word for word. I froze. The chills climbed my back, slow and sharp like icy fingers. One page caught my eye. It had a series of numbers. 3.251 to 7.918, 13.4 to 13.4, 3.13. The last one hit me in the chest. 3:13. The time the voice came through the radio every night. It couldn't be a coincidence. Next to the numbers was a single line of writing in red ink. He's listening through the machine. Don't finish the sequence. I didn't understand what it meant yet, but I felt something shift in the air around me, like the walls were pulling closer. I kept flipping. Deeper in the notebook, the writing changed. It got frantic, scratched and heavy, like he wrote in the dark or while his hand was shaking. One page was nearly torn through. Across it were 3 sentences. They speak in echoes. They sound like us, but they are not us. I slammed the notebook shut. For a long moment, I just sat there. The quiet in my house wasn't comforting anymore. It was loud, deafening. I could hear every tick of the clock, every breath I took. Then I heard the soft click. The radio in the corner of the room turned on by itself. No power, no light, just the slow, creeping hum of static. I stood up too fast. My chair tipped and hit the floor behind me. The sound grew sharper, like something buried beneath the static was trying to crawl out. I stepped closer. My hand hovered over the dial, but I didn't touch it. And then, there it was. A voice, faint and broken, like it had traveled through water and fire to reach me. Grellish, still there. Cold. So cold. I backed away slowly. My hands were shaking. That wasn't just any voice. It was Evan's. Not just the sound, the rhythm. The way he always said my name like it was a joke and a question at the same time. I ran to the notebook. I had to find something, anything, to explain what the hell was happening. As I flipped back through the pages, I found a small taped envelope I hadn't noticed before. Inside was a folded map of Ashvale, marked with red XS. One of them was at the edge of the forest, near the observatory. And next to it, in a sharp, urgent scrawl, "Don't let the signal complete." The notebook slipped from my hands. I think I knew, even then, that something had started. Something I couldn't stop just by turning off a radio. Evan had found it first, and it had taken him. Now it was speaking through him, or something wearing his voice. I didn't know what Codex Ashvale really was, but I was about to find out. The walk back to the observatory felt heavier than the first time. Maybe it was the knowledge, or maybe it was the weight of the silence that followed me, like a shadow I couldn't shake. Every crack of a twig beneath my boots felt louder. Every rustle in the leaves made me look twice. When I reached the clearing, the building loomed like it had been waiting. Its crooked satellite dish still pointed at the gray sky, frozen in time. Vines clung to its stone like claws. I pushed open the rusted door and stepped inside. Robin was there. He sat in the same worn-out chair near the back, hunched slightly, staring at a screen that showed nothing but snow. That flickering black and white static filled the room with a soft hiss, like a whisper trying not to be heard. He didn't turn when I entered. Just said, "You came back." I didn't answer right away. My hand tightened around the notebook in my jacket. The last message I decoded was still fresh in my mind. "He knows you're listening. Don't let the signal complete." I walked deeper into the room. The smell of dust and ozone clung to the air. Old machines lined the walls, their blinking lights slow and unsteady, like a dying heartbeat. "Robin," I said quietly, "I need to know the truth. What is this place? And what the hell is that signal?" His hand moved slowly to a switch, turning off the static. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence, as if the air itself had been cut. He finally looked at me. His eyes were sharp, but there was something hollow behind them, like he hadn't slept in years. Maybe decades. "This place," he began, his voice low, "wasn't built for weather tracking, like the town says. It wasn't for stargazing either. It was built to listen." "To what?" "To the space between things," he said, almost like a prayer. "Not space up there." He gestured vaguely at the ceiling, but the kind of space that exists between thought and sound, between what we know and what we fear. I blinked. "That's not an answer." He nodded slowly. "No, it isn't. But I'll give you one." He stood up and moved to a filing cabinet tucked in the corner. From the bottom drawer, he pulled out a folder, yellowed and crinkled at the edges. He handed it to me. Inside were black and white photos. Men in lab coats standing next to equipment. Typed reports full of redacted lines. A title stamped across the top. "Project Fathom, Acoustic Gateway Trials." They were trying to make contact, Robin said. Not with aliens. Not with the dead. With something else. Something older than both. I stared at the folder. My mouth had gone dry. "You mean, another dimension?" Robin smiled faintly, like he'd heard that question 1,000 times. "Not another dimension. Another layer. Think of reality like a frequency band. Most people live on the middle station. But sometimes, if you turn the dial just right, you hear the voices." He nodded. "At first, they're faint. Then they get clearer. Then they start talking to you. And if you listen long enough," he trailed off, his eyes locking onto mine. "They know you." I felt cold crawl in my spine. "What happens if they know you?" "You change," Robin whispered. "You hear them when you're not listening. You see them when your eyes are closed. And eventually, you stop knowing which thoughts are yours." I stepped back, heart pounding. "Why didn't you stop them?" "I tried. Everyone else in the project disappeared. Some vanished during transmissions. Others," he paused. "They left notes. One man drilled holes in his own ears. Said it was the only way to silence the broadcaster." I opened my mouth, but no words came. Robin turned away, looking back at the blank screen. "You think it's your brother, don't you?" I stiffened. "He heard the signal too. Years ago. He came here, just like you. Thought he could find answers." Robin's voice dropped. "He became one." My throat tightened. "He became one of the voices." The room felt like it tilted for a moment. I stepped back, almost stumbling. "He's not dead, Grellish. He's broadcasting. Stuck on that frequency. And now that you've heard him, heard them, they know you too." I turned to leave. My skin felt too tight, like it was trying to crawl off my bones. "Destroy the radio," Robin said quietly behind me. "Before it finishes tuning you." I didn't respond. I just walked out into the gray woods, the sound of static still buzzing faintly in the back of my skull. And I knew, deep down, I couldn't unhear any of it. Not now. Not ever. I don't know when it started, whether it was last night or the night before. Time began to slip away, like grains of sand through an open hand. The static had always been there, but now it felt different. Heavier. The voice that had once spoken to me from the old radio, the one I had tried to ignore, was now in my mind, not just through the airwaves. It would arrive at random moments, creeping in like a distant thunderstorm. At first, I thought it was just the exhaustion. I hadn't slept much in days, trying to piece together the scraps of my brother's notes and the fragmented transmissions. I pull out the old code books, rifling through the yellowed pages, convinced that if I just worked a little longer, something would make sense. But that night, it wasn't just the voice I heard. It was the shadows. I was sitting at my desk in the dim glow of a lamp, fingers stiff from typing out the same message I had already decoded 5 times, when I saw it. At first, it was only a flicker, a movement too quick to catch in the corner of my eye. I turned my head, half expecting to see something shift in the dark, but the room was still, the only sound the static hum from the radio on my desk. I shrugged it off. The house was old. Old houses creak. The wires in the walls could be playing tricks on me. But when I turned back to my desk, there was something new. Something wrong. The shadows were stretching across the room. The lamp, the only source of light, wasn't enough to hold them back. They curled like fingers, reaching along the walls, moving with an unnatural fluidity. I blinked. Was I dreaming? My head felt thick, heavy. But no, I wasn't dreaming. The shadows were there, and they were alive. My breath caught in my throat. I stood up, backing away from my desk, but my legs felt numb. The shadows didn't follow me at first, but I could hear them now, rubbing together like fabric, the soft whisper of something shifting in the dark. A groan, maybe. A sigh. But they were there, right in front of me. I glanced at the radio. It had grown louder over the past few nights, the static warping into something worse. The voices, the cries for help, they weren't just from the radio anymore. They were in the room, inside my head. But now there was something else. Something darker. A pulse. Like a heartbeat. Grellish. The voice was so soft I almost didn't hear it. But I did. It was me. I recognized it. I froze. The voice, my voice, whispered from the static. But it didn't sound like me. It wasn't the same. It was distorted, like it had been stretched and twisted into something that wasn't quite human anymore. I reached for the radio, fingers trembling. It crackled, the sound sharp, too loud. The whispers grew louder, rising in pitch like 1,000 voices all trying to speak at once. I held my breath. Grellish, help, help me. I recoiled, the radio slipping from my hands and crashing to the floor with a sickening thud. The static didn't stop. It was everywhere, filling the room, drowning out the air. The shadows were closer now, surrounding me like a living thing, pressing in from all sides. I could hear them, feel them. They were breathing, just out of sight. Stop, please stop. My voice came out hoarse, strained. But it didn't matter. They weren't listening. I wasn't sure they ever had. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my own feet, my heart hammering in my chest. The shadows followed me, moving in a way that wasn't natural. They stretched, twisted, curling into shapes that shouldn't be. They had no defined edges, no lines. Just a mass of darkness, ever shifting. Suddenly, the whispers stopped. The radio was silent, the room still. Too still. I stood there, motionless, waiting for something to happen, waiting for the next voice, the next command. But it didn't come. Instead, there was a soft, muffled sound, like something dragging itself across the floor, slow and deliberate. My eyes darted to the source. Under my desk, just barely visible in the dark, there was something there. It wasn't a shadow anymore. It was a shape, an outline, distorted and warped. Something or someone. I swallowed hard, taking a cautious step forward. My heart felt like it was lodged in my throat. I bent down, trying to peer through the darkness. And then I saw it. A face. It was my face. Or rather, it was a face that had once been mine. Twisted, distorted, its eyes wide with terror, its mouth frozen in a scream that couldn't escape. The face was staring back at me from the floor, its skin stretched thin, lips parted, trying to say something. But it was only a reflection, a hollow, empty version of me. I stumbled back, falling hard against the wall. My head spun, my vision blurred, and then Just as suddenly as it had started, everything went silent again. The shadows, the voice, the reflection, gone. I sat there for what felt like hours, unable to move, unable to breathe. I don't know when I finally managed to get up, but I did. I walked to the window, looked out at the dark trees of Blackwood. The forest was still, too still, and I knew, deep down, that something had followed me. I turned away from the window, walking slowly back toward the desk. My hand shook as I reached for the radio. I couldn't hear anything now, nothing but my own ragged breathing, but it was still there. The static, waiting, whispering. I knew then. It wasn't just the radio that had changed. It was me. I was no longer the same, and I wasn't sure if I could ever escape. The air smelled old, stale, like damp wood that had been locked away for decades. Blackwood forest pressed in on all sides, the trees looming like sentinels watching over something buried. I wasn't sure what I expected to find when I hiked deeper into those woods, but it certainly wasn't this. The observatory stood half swallowed by vines and moss, its rusted iron structure barely visible behind the thick growth. It looked like a relic from another time, abandoned and forgotten, but there was something oddly alive about it, almost as if it were breathing in the cold, wet air. I paused at the entrance, the heavy door hanging crooked on its hinges, as if daring me to step inside. The sounds of the forest were muffled here, like a thick blanket had been thrown over everything. The wind, the birds, the faint rustle of leaves. It all seemed distant, far away. Only the sound of my own breath and the thudding of my heart remained. I stepped into the darkness. The room inside was colder than I expected, the kind of cold that sinks into your bones. A few old chairs, piles of dust-covered books, and a metal desk littered with paper and abandoned projects. But it was the machinery that grabbed my attention. It stood in the center, covered in layers of grime, old wiring snaking out from the walls like veins. The blinking lights, some flickering weakly, others dead, told me this place hadn't been touched in years, maybe decades. But there was something about it, something wrong. It felt like I wasn't alone, like the shadows were watching me. I walked around the room, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. In the far corner, I spotted a small metal hatch, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. I knelt down and yanked at the rusted handle. It screeched like 1,000 nails on a chalkboard, but the door finally gave way. I crouched low and crawled through, the air getting colder the deeper I went. The tunnel opened into a large underground chamber, its walls lined with ancient radio equipment. The kind of stuff you'd see in old military photos. Massive transmitters, long coils of wire, and monitors that looked like they hadn't been used since the 1960s. And then I saw the names. Scrawled across one of the walls, as if carved into the stone, were dozens of names. Some were legible, some not so much, but one thing was clear. These people had been here. And then, they were gone. I ran my fingers over the cold stone, tracing the names, trying to make sense of them. Most of them were strangers, but some felt familiar. The longer I stared, the more I could feel it, something tugging at the back of my mind, like a memory I couldn't quite reach. Then I saw it, near the bottom, etched in uneven letters, GRE.ARD. My stomach dropped. It was my name, or at least part of it. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. My mind raced as I stepped back from the wall, the room spinning around me. How was my name here? Why was my name here? I turned, heart pounding, and there, standing in the far corner, was Robin. His pale face, just barely visible in the dim light, twisted into something between a smile and a grimace. "I see you found it," he said, his voice calm but cold. "The truth you've been looking for." I wanted to ask him 1,000 questions. About the observatory, the names, about the radio, and the voice that had been haunting me for weeks. But I couldn't form the words. My throat tightened, and all I could do was stare at him. Robin stepped closer, the dim light catching his eyes. "It's not just a radio," he said softly. "This place was built for something much greater than communication. It's a gateway." I swallowed hard, trying to process what he was saying. A gateway? A gateway to what? Before I could ask, Robin continued, his voice growing darker. "You've been hearing them, haven't you? The voices. The ones you thought were your brother. They're not just transmissions, Grellish. They're connections. Portals." I backed away slowly, the room suddenly feeling smaller, suffocating. What are you talking about? I finally managed to choke out. Robin didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the far side of the room and began fiddling with a massive console, flipping switches, adjusting dials. The machines hummed to life, the static growing louder, buzzing in my ears. He looked back at me, his face now eerily calm. It's too late now, Grellish. You've listened to the signal. You've opened the door, and you're already part of it. The air crackled with energy, the hum of the machines rising in pitch. I could feel the walls vibrating, the floor beneath my feet shaking as the machines seemed to power up. The frequency, it was shifting, changing, coming closer. And then, in the static, I heard it again. The voice. But this time, it wasn't a plea for help. It wasn't my brother. It was me. Don't let them find me. The voice whispered. I don't want to be here. My blood ran cold. The voice was mine, and it was coming from somewhere else, from a place I couldn't reach. I turned toward Robin, my mind reeling. What the hell did you do? He only smiled, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. I didn't do anything. You were the one who listened. And now, you're here, too. I stumbled back, my heart hammering in my chest. This place, this signal, it wasn't just a transmission. It was a trap I'd walked straight into. I had no choice but to run, but as I turned toward the exit, I could feel it, the pull of the signal, the cold grasp of the voices reaching for me. And I knew, in the pit of my stomach, that I was never going to escape. Not now. Not ever. The static would follow me. The air was thick inside the observatory, heavier than the air outside. It pressed against my chest, squeezing the breath from me as I walked through the dimly lit room. The walls were lined with rusting equipment, wires coiling like dead snakes across the floor. The hum of the machines was louder now, more pronounced, like they were alive, begging to be heard. I stood still for a moment, my fingers trailing over the cracked metal surface of an old radio transmitter. I hadn't planned on coming back here. Not like this, anyway. The plan was simple enough. Destroy the equipment, burn it all down, and never hear that voice again. But now, I was standing in the heart of it, surrounded by the very thing that had been torturing me for days. The voice. The static. I wanted to turn and leave, to walk out into the fog-covered woods and forget all of this. But my feet wouldn't move. My mind wouldn't let me. The lights flickered, casting long, stretching shadows against the walls. Then, I heard it, the faint crackle of static, a whisper barely audible beneath the hum. I reached for the nearest radio, my fingers trembling. It wasn't supposed to be here. This wasn't the time. Grellish. My breath caught in my throat. The voice. I didn't want to hear it, but it was there, unmistakable, clear as day. My name. It was my voice. Not through the radio, but inside my head. It wasn't possible. I gripped the radio tighter, turning the dials frantically, my mind racing. No, this isn't real. It's just static. It's all just static. But deep down I knew. I had known it for days. This was no accident. And then I saw him. Robin stood in the doorway, his face as calm as ever, his hands clasped behind his back. He looked like he'd been expecting this. It's too late now, Grellish, he said, his voice a soft echo, like he was speaking from distance. You've already heard it, haven't you? The signal. I felt my heart drop. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. The room seemed to close in on me, the walls pressing tighter, the air thickening, until it was hard to breathe. I've been waiting for you, Robin continued, his gaze never leaving mine. You're the next one. You hear it, don't you? The voices, the fragments of them. I nodded, too stunned to respond. They want you to listen, Grellish. You were meant to. All of this, it's just a precursor. A test. You're part of something bigger now. Don't you feel it? His words were like a poison, slow-moving but undeniable. I felt the truth of them deep in my bones. The signal wasn't a mistake. It was pulling me in, dragging me closer to something I didn't understand, something I couldn't control. I need to stop it. It needs to end. I choked out. But my voice felt thin and weak. Robin smiled then, a slow, sad smile. You can't stop it, Grellish. No one can. The signal is already in you. It's been in you since the moment you first listened. The frequency, it's inside all of us now. I shook my head, tried to clear the fog, trying to think, but it was impossible. I was already trapped in this web of sound, of static, of whispers. I won't let you destroy it, Robin said, stepping forward, his presence overwhelming. This is bigger than you. This is bigger than all of us. I backed away, heart pounding. No, no, you don't understand. You don't know what it does. It's driving me mad. It's driving me to the edge. But Robin was relentless. He didn't raise his voice, didn't even raise a hand. Instead, he just watched, patient, like a man who knew what was coming. Like he'd been waiting for it. I've been listening for years, he said, his eyes flicking to the equipment around us. Do you think I don't hear it? The voices that whisper in the dark. The ones that call to us, calling from beyond the veil. It's not madness, Grellish. It's the truth. The truth that can't be ignored. The static grew louder, more insistent, like 1,000 voices were speaking all at once. My hands trembled on the radio's dials, desperately trying to turn it off, but it didn't matter. The sound was everywhere now. Inside me. Outside me. And then it came. A scream. My scream. My voice, but not my voice, rising out of the static, distorted and broken. Don't let him find me. It was me. I could hear it. It was a cry for help, a plea from the future, from someone, from me, trapped inside the signal. Robin didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. That's you, he said softly. Your future self. You're the one who needs help, Grellish. And you've been calling to yourself all along. I felt my legs buckle beneath me. The floor tilted, and the walls began to close in. The radio hissed louder, almost deafening now. I looked up at Robin, but he was already gone, a shadow in the darkened doorway. The signal was all that was left. It was inescapable. There was no turning back now. I didn't need to look at the radio to know that the transmission was still going, still calling, still waiting. It was part of me now. I could feel it in my veins. The last thing I heard before everything went black was my own voice, calling out again. A voice that would never be answered. And in that silence, I knew it was already too late. I woke up in the dark. It wasn't the kind of darkness that settled after sunset. This was the kind of dark that felt thicker, like it had weight. The air was dense with something. The silence was suffocating. And then there was the hum. The same low buzz I'd been hearing ever since this whole nightmare started. It wasn't coming from the radio anymore. At least, I didn't think it was. It was in my head, like a whisper behind my skull. A static that I could almost taste. I was lying on the cold concrete floor of the observatory's lower bunker. My hands felt gritty, like I had been touching old wiring and rusted metal for hours, maybe longer. My head throbbed, not from any physical injury, but from something deeper, an ache that didn't belong to my body. The kind of ache that makes you question what's inside your mind. I stumbled to my feet, my legs unsteady. The lights in the observatory were out. I fumbled around, trying to get my bearings, but there was no comfort in the dark. The familiar hum pulsed again, louder now. Was I hearing it? Or was it just me? It didn't matter. The truth was, I couldn't tell anymore. I reached the elevator shaft at the back of the room. There was a little square window I could peer through, but I knew I wasn't supposed to look. Not anymore. Robin had warned me about it. Warned me about everything. But I wasn't thinking about his warnings anymore. I had to know. I had to finish this. I found the stairwell and made my way up to the main floor. The observatory was still. Too still. Not a sound except for the hum in my head. The buzz that felt like it was crawling under my skin, like it was inside me, too. I don't remember how I got back to the equipment. Maybe it was the instinct that pulled me there, the same way I'd been pulled back to the radio all those nights. I should have destroyed it. I should have smashed it, taken an axe to the wires. But I didn't. I couldn't. The machines were silent. Everything was shut down. Everything except for the hum, still pulsing in my skull. Then something changed. I didn't hear it first, not with my ears, but I felt it. A tremor, like a frequency hitting its peak. Then a sharp crackle. Then, no, it wasn't just noise. It was words. Clear. The same voice I'd heard before. The one begging for help. Grellish. It was my name. I froze. I couldn't move. I could hear my pulse in my throat. The voice, it was mine. But it wasn't. It was older, raspier, weaker. Help me. Please don't let him find me. The static pulsed again. But the voice didn't stop. It kept going. It's too late. You shouldn't have listened. You're in the wrong place now. The door is closing. My heart was racing, my fingers twitching. I looked at the equipment, still silent in front of me. There was nothing on the monitors. Nothing flashing. No lights. But I could hear it. I could hear myself crying out, begging. I stumbled forward, toward the control panel. My hands were shaking, but I reached out anyway, as if my body knew something my mind didn't. No, no, I whispered to myself, pressing buttons in a frenzy. This isn't happening. But it was. It was happening. I knew that now. Everything I'd been running from was finally here, in this room. It was the signal. The one I'd been hearing all along, ever since I plugged in that damn radio. But it wasn't just a transmission anymore. It had become something more, something that pulsed inside me, like it had always been there, waiting to surface. I had been so sure that if I just stopped listening, it would go away. But it hadn't. It never did. The more I listened, the more it grew. It didn't want to be shut off. It needed me. Or at least, it needed something. I stepped back, my breathing coming in short bursts. The voice, my voice, continued to echo through my mind. The words were distorted now, overlapping, like I was hearing hundreds of versions of myself, all crying out in unison. It's not real, Grellish. You're not real. It's just a loop. Don't you understand? You are not supposed to be here. It hit me like a punch to the gut. A cold rush flooded my chest, my skin prickling with terror. I wasn't hearing the voice of someone else. It was me. I was the one speaking. It wasn't a transmission from the past, or from some far-off place. It was coming from my future. Everything clicked into place. The signal wasn't a message. It was a trap, and now it had me. You listened, Grellish. And now it's too late. I couldn't take it anymore. My hand were on the radio now. I was pulling at the wires. But even as I broke the connection, I could feel it. I could feel it in my bones, in my head, in my soul. The signal wasn't gone. It was inside me. It was me, and there was no escaping it. The hum was still there, and it was growing louder. It had already started.